Hello, my name is Christiane Herr, or also called Candy. For the past 2 years, I have served as the president of CAADRIA. This year, as you may know, CAADRIA 2020 is the 25th anniversary conference of the association. In my paper, I examine how CAADRIA has developed over 25 years, one generation of CAD researchers. The presentation discusses CAADRIA as an association and considers its trajectory as indicative of the broader development of the field of CAD research in Asia. 25 years ago, CAADRIA was founded with the 4 objectives that you can still find on our webpage. Back in 1996, CAADRIA aimed to promote CAD in Asian schools of architecture and related disciplines. It was conceived as a venue to bring together researchers who were mainly educators, working in a field that was not yet well established in most institutions. Accordingly, CAADRIAs Objectives focus on CAD-related community development across Asia in the form of educational initiatives and collaborations. They also emphasize a focus on creativity rather than on production. Recent developments in our field seem to be diverging from these aims. CAADRIA papers, for example, increasingly feature production-oriented digital design support and mostly technical topics. Fewer and fewer papers address and support the original objectives outlined here. Maybe this warrants reflection. Are the original objectives now obsolete? And how is this related to ongoing developments in the Asian academic landscape? When CAADRIA started out in 1996, the conference only had 32 papers. This number, however, as you know, increased steadily, with CAADRIA 2019 accepting 160 full papers, a number that can be expected to grow even further. We have increased the quality of our research output during the same time, with a 2-stage double-blind review process, open source papers, and with indexing several databases and publishing in dedicated journal issues. Interestingly, CAADRIA continues to operate in a very informal, community-based way, where more experienced members of the association share their understanding with new members. Only now, after 25 years, are we starting to document our practices more permanently as the association continues to grow. But it's not just CAADRIA that has changed. All of Asia has changed considerably. Most CAADRIA papers are funded through national funding agencies rather than the private sector. So over the past 25 years, Asia has seen significant changes in national spending on research and development. While the first conferences featured many papers from Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, and Japan, more recent conferences have seen many submissions by authors from South Korea and especially from mainland China. The diagram to the right illustrates the increases in research and development spending of selected countries over this time frame. The preferences of national funding bodies thus have a very strong impact on CAADRIA and its research community. Accordingly, research in the areas of AI, automation, robotics, and related software is predicted to dominate in the near future. Typical CAADRIA research papers tend to take a quantitative approach, emphasizing scientific methods. Many present prototype implementations, some of which are developed for wider use. Design-driven studies, however, are more rare, and only very few papers pursue qualitative or discursive research approaches. The number of themes, for example, related to CAD theory, CAD philosophy, or topics like gender studies and digital design are indeed quite rare. Most research presented in CAADRIA comes out of academic settings and relates only loosely to design practice. We could say that CAD research presented at CAADRIA is a parallel to applied architectural design practice, and it neither leads it nor follows it. The increasing dependency on national funding bodies, together with the increasing professionalization of our discipline, make it likely that CAADRIA will continue to move further towards pragmatic and utilitarian aims. The question arises whether these tendencies can indeed be aligned well with the CAADRIA objective we discussed before, to promote research and teaching in CAD that enhances creativity rather than production. When we talk about development of themes and movements of a time in architecture, a diagram comes to mind that you may have seen before. It describes the evolution of architecture in the 20th century and was drawn by architectural historian Charles Jencks. Jencks himself said that the diagram is necessarily subjective, as it draws together very diverse ideas and it compresses them into one simplified matrix. However, he also argued many would agree with his illustration, which in its simplicity allows a broad overview of the discipline's trajectory. The diagram is not about one single movement, but about the flow of ideas and the competitive drama, as Jencks called it, among movements over time. The diagram sparks the imagination and allows speculations on where movements are going. Most trends, Jencks observes, last a mere decade before they wane and they're replaced by others. As a long-term member of CAADRIA, I thought it may be interesting to develop a similar kind of diagram for CAADRIA and its first 25 years. For this paper, I have thus examined keywords of CAADRIA papers as they are archived on our database CAAD since 2008. I assume that keywords, as they are stated by authors, reflect the core topics of the research presented in each paper. So the analysis presented here is limited to 12 years, the time frame between 2008 and 2019. After collecting the keywords from CAAD, the keyword lists were grouped to identify larger thematic clusters and to help the visualization. The keywords were sorted according to the number of occurrence in each conference, with a focus on the top 40 keywords for each year. This step requires some changes in grammar as well as some manual selection and editing. You can see some of the data after processing to the left and the right of the slide. This diagram now is the main outcome of this study. It illustrates the keyword clusters as research themes, so they can be read as a development process over time. Even for a relatively short time span of 12 years, there is a lot of change that can be visualized. As in Jencks' diagram, we can see trends waxing and waning, and we can see now how they relate to each other. I would like to briefly point out some key observations. CAADRIA 2008 to the left, with 13 keyword clusters among the top 40 keywords, featured much more variety compared to CAADRIA 2019 to the right, where we can see only 5 keywords. Why so few? I suspect that one reason for this apparent homogenization is the recent growth of CAADRIA conferences. The top 40 keywords have become aligned, in part due to sheer numbers of participants. Another likely reason is that research interests of CAADRIA authors are more and more streamlined and pegged to availability of research funding, which is often tied to topics emphasizing AI, machine learning, and digital fabrication. As more money is invested by institutions into expensive toolsets, researchers are under pressure to promise utility and application, as illustrated by increasing numbers of keywords relating, for example, to BIM and digital fabrication. At the same time, other themes gradually lost importance, in particular keywords relating to architecture, design process, design theory, and education, which you can see on the top left-hand side. The last time education featured among the top 40 keywords of a CAADRIA conference was in 2012. Some themes are more intermittent. In some years, the presence of certain research communities creates something like a thematic bubble, as you can see with virtual reality, which is a typical example. Some developments are surprising. Parametric design, for example, was one of the strongest research keyword groupings until it completely disappeared from the 40 most frequently named keywords in 2019. This is not necessarily an indication of its disappearance. More likely, it has become so widely accepted that it does not need to be singled out as a separate area of research anymore. Of course, now that we have the diagram, we can speculate. Where is CAADRIA going? Here are some predictions and speculations. I believe that BIM will experience similar developments to parametric design. It will likely lose in importance compared to the more general and integrated approach to digital design management and construction that can be labeled simply computational design. You see that to the top right-hand side. Generative design seems to be a source of creative play more than others, and for that reason it will likely stay as a container category. Digital fabrication, meanwhile, dominates CAADRIA themes at the moment, which I think will eventually lead to new research directions emerging within this broad thematic cluster. For example, separating and specializing into themes related to material innovation or robotic control. Given the very strong impact of national funding agencies, I, however, doubt that education, theory, and other qualitative interests will feature prominently in the next few years. So, this is only a brief presentation. I would like to invite you to develop your own speculations on the future of a research field based on the analysis and the diagram, and of course, I would like to invite you to read the full paper. Thank you very much for your attention.